invitation, Christine Wright and her wonderful newlywed husband, Dennis, they said yes to this project, and we're here all week beautifying. So when you get finished with service, I'd love for you to look at this extraordinary tree of life within our symbol and teaching about change. And Christine has woven words that we use, affirmations, and you'll notice that there are leaves above that are not adorned as yet, because what she said to me is it gives us room to grow and open at the top. So may we please give some love and appreciation to Christine and Dennis Wright. They were quite a team effort on this, and they were absolutely adorable. And thank you so much for your passion and flexibility and amazing gifts. So we continue to change, adorn, and beautify in this appreciation. And now I move into today's topic. And today's topic, which was not printed in the e-blast or anywhere for you to see, is capital E period, capital G period, capital O period, which without those little things you would say is the word ego. And I know for many people within New Thought and a lot of the spiritual teachings, because if you go on the web and you type in E period G period O period, you get the acronym translating as edging God out. I'm sure many of you have you heard that before? That, oh, this is going to be, fun, new, all right. That it's been a concept taught by a lot of my colleagues and within other spiritual practices that sometimes dealing with the ego could be translated as edging God out. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more. But first, we always go to my first favorite book, which is the dictionary. The word ego has been defined as thinking, feeling, and acting self that is conscious of itself and aware of its distinction from the selves of others and from the object of its thought or operations. An egoist is defined as one who is completely devoted to his own interests, a selfish person. Egoism is defined as inordinate concern for one's own welfare and interests. So when most of us think of the idea of ego, it sometimes gets kind of lumped into the concept of arrogance and maybe narcissism. That when we talk about ego, don't you just envision somebody getting all puffed up and your ego's in the way? So then one of my other mystics, John Lennon, writes, if being an egomaniac means I believe in what I do and in my art or my music, in that respect, you can call me that. I believe in what I do, and I'll say it. So where we're going with this today is most of us have this kind of judgment about the idea of being egotistical. And a lot of our spiritual colleagues and faiths and philosophies talk about edging God out, and that if we are dealing with our ego, our individualized ego, personality, etc., that we're edging God out and that there's something wrong and we need to get out our bloated nothingness out of the way. And there was an article by a lady named Gwen Phillips. I want to read her quote. In many spiritual practices, such as A Course in Miracles, there is another definition for ego, and that's the one I'm talking about here. The ego is literally a fearful thought. The ego is always based in fear. Just knowing that the ego is fearful thought will probably not do much to help us recognize the ego at first, but with knowing some of the characteristics of the ego, we begin to not only recognize it, but to see the effect of its negativity in our lives. The ego is the idea that we are either better than or worse than. She continues, it tells us that we are not good enough or they are not good enough, and sometimes all at the same time. The ego never tells us we are part of anything or we belong. The ego is the thought of separation, separate from others, separate from God. It has no sense of unity. It has no sense of equality, brother or sisterhood, a sense of well-being with one another. The ego doesn't know that we are all related, all loved, and never alone. That's Gwen Phillips' approach to that. So I'm reading that, and I'm listening to what most people think, and when I went on the web and just typed in ego and edging God out, and I realized that, and I'll speak for myself, one can be really judgmental about this and suddenly give ego a bad rap. And in the idea of addressing ego, one's own or someone else's, we have already separated ourselves. Even though it seemed like the right thing to do, to identify ego as getting puffed up and in the way, we are suddenly judging that as less than. So edging God out, although that has its place in the sense of sometimes when we live our lives and we try to do things, we edge God out because we want to control it, we want it our way, we want it that way, and we get so full of our stuff that we edge God out and don't allow the divine flow. We also, most of us, many of us, think of ego as negative. So today, I would like to change that. I would like to bring some healing and unity and release the duality of ego by thinking of E.G.O as potentially edging God out when we're trying to control our lives and insist that it be this way and God doesn't know any better. I would like to change it to engaging God's omnipotence. Because I absolutely believe that part of who we are, our personalities, our identities, human and divine as one, our egos are not our enemies. It's not something that I want to disown. It is perhaps something I want to keep in check, that I might want to moderate. But I don't want to see that as separate from me. That if I'm in my ego, as maybe John Lennon talks about, then perhaps I'm on a different track. Now, pause for a moment, or freeze frame that. How y'all doing with the no complaint zone? For those of you who may not have been here at the beginning of the month and you didn't know, what I talked about was the concept of, there was a gentleman whose name eludes me right now, forgive me, who came up with this idea from his church of having I think it was a purple bracelet that said no complaints. And the concept was that you put it on your wrist and that when you identify yourself complaining, grousing, perhaps being in the ego, you shift it to the other wrist. And every time you do that, it's another 21 days, because it's supposed to be a 21-day spiritual practice of how to break yourself of complaining and whining. So you shift it if you find yourself doing that. And it's been an interesting process. And I have to tell you that the past week, I wanted to cut this bracelet up. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I was getting chafed from swapping it from one wrist to the other. Because my ego was leading the pack. My ego was out there driving and playing bumper cars with other egos in my world, to where the point it was like, I really just wanted to toss this thing. It was like, I'll show you. And then I moved it over here. So I have more than 21 days ahead of me. I thought my goal was to be complete by next Sunday. I don't think so. And I believe that the campaign has already been effective, because just that awareness of when I go to grouse or get really cranky, snarky, or my ego gets in the way of being able to shift it, what that has done is brought me into present time. So that I might look at what is it that's making me at someone or at myself. Is this really a complaint? Is it a flag, something that I need to pay attention to? Or is there a different opportunity for healing, particularly when it is engaged with another person? Abraham Hicks says, complaining about anything holds you in the place of refusing to receive the things you've been asking for. Ooh. I'm not complaining, I'm just reading. Justifying about anything holds you in the place of refusing to let in the very things you've been asking for. Blaming someone holds you in the place of refusing to let in the things you want. Feeling guilty, feeling angry, it doesn't matter what you call it, it is still a refusal, albeit not a conscious one. You're asking for the things you want. You can't help but ask. The universe is yielding, it can't help but yield. So it's a big question, folks. Why aren't you letting it in? Freud goes on to say, analysis does not set out to make pathological reactions impossible, but to give the patient's ego freedom to decide one way or the other. Well, if you take out the word analysis and patient, and you talk about it from one-on-one, a person to a person, it's actually a discussion about spiritual growth. That if we get to identify where our ego is in a rut, or our ego is in confrontation mode, we have the freedom to decide whether or not to complain, whether or not to engage in that, whether or not to go to our sacred centered self, or watch the dance that's going on. So, I'm thinking about ego, and I'm thinking about how it means and what it is, and edging God out, or puffed up arrogance, or is it engaging God's omnipotence, omnipresence? So, last night, I did something uncharacteristic. I said, Don, we're going to a movie. It's Saturday night. You never go to the movies before a Sunday talk. You're always right there talking. I know, and it won't surprise some of you who know me pretty well. We went to see Jobs. Those of you who do know me well know that I am a dyed-in-the-wool Apple computer fan, loyalist, and user. Read, the big giant biography, Jobs. So I wanted our ticket money to go into the opening sales for the opening weekend of the movie. And I realistically knew that if you're going to talk about somebody who is a combination of edging God out and engaging God's omnipotence, Steve Jobs pretty much fills that bill. Because as visionary as he was, and how he has influenced our life, he wasn't always the nicest of people. In fact, it was sometimes uncomfortable to watch some of that. It's like, don't do that, Steve. Don't you know better? You were a Buddhist, you were a fruitarian, you read Ram Dass, you're this creative visionary. Do you really have to act out like that? And so what I got to watch, because I had read the book, so I knew some of his antics, was his edging God out, butted up against his desire to engage God's omnipotence. And I thought about how that might be for many of us, that we don't really understand the difference when we're edging God out because we're right and you're wrong, or you hurt me. No, you hurt me first, and that, whatever the little dance we do, that if we can get beyond that, most of the time it's coming from a fear that we're not going to get to dance with God's omnipotence through us, through a situation, through a dynamic of people. Really, that's where I'll agree with that, Gwen Phillips. Then it's when it becomes about fear, when our ego gets in the way, thinking that you're not going to see how brilliant I am. You're not going to hear the music in my head. You're not going to see the pictures that I see. So what's going to happen is my ego's going to come out, and we're going to do what there used to be two little toys, I think, when I was a kid. Sock'em Bock'em robot, something like that. You know what? I don't know. What was they called? Sock'em? Pardon? Well, those two little robots, and you put in batteries and they bopped each other. Well, that wasn't my kind of toy, but I remember the commercial. And that's what it sometimes feels like when we're engaged in an opportunity to understand God's omnipotence through us instead of edging God out. Mr. Jobs goes on to say, your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. I didn't expect to be caught by that today. I know his stuff by heart. You may also know that the campaign that was used for the iMac, the Think Different campaign, is my anthem. It was read at my installation. I have it framed. Here's to the crazy ones. If you don't know it, please look it up, or I will get it for you, because it's a beautiful poem essay. And when I think about some of that struggle that Mr. Jobs seemed to have had, I understand. I related to some of that. Don't you see? Can't you hear? Da, da, da. And people are going, no, I don't. I can't. It isn't there. He acted out differently when that would happen than I do. And in some ways I thought, wow, there's almost a part of me that wish I had that bravado. And then the other part goes, no, that's not how we deal with it. And that's why I am so grateful to have this teaching. And yet, I listened to some of that, and it's about, don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And when we do let others' opinions drown out our own inner voice, we're often edging God out and dancing with trying to engage God's omnipotence through us and trying to figure out how that can be in perfect concentric circles while we live in this human world together. Not always easy. But no one said, or did they? Did someone tell you that being on a spiritual path was going to be easy? Did they? Did anyone really come in here going, easy peasy, pudding and pie, you know? Remember, the first week here, I spoke about Pollyanna. And some of us grew up going, well, yeah. And then you go out there, and people are dancing and listening to a different tune. That doesn't make the tune bad or wrong. But they may be listening to a different, iPod than I am. And I was struck by the fact through all of that stuff that Mr. Jobs went through and all that Apple went through. And when there's a little clip where he talks about when he first introduced the iPod. Now, iPods now, how many, that was 2001. So iPod is sort of duh now. We don't even, it's like, yeah, iPod. When he introduced it to Apple itself, before it went public, what he said was, we're going to revolutionize the world and how you think and mostly how you listen, and music is about the soul. And he said, and then he says, 1,000 songs in your pocket, and he pulls it out. And there's a, which it was, 12 years ago. And what he said was, this isn't about technology. He said this was a tool of the heart. Now, when I heard that, I melted. Yes, I know. This is a man who was looking at dollars and stocks and numbers and profits. I don't lose that. But what he did was engage God's omnipotence through his ideas and visions and that of his team and Jonathan Ive to say, give me something that will do this. How about this? Can we have this? Can we do? And people created it. And yes, I know, it wasn't always easy or pretty. But he did. And he's right, because what happened, and this isn't a commercial right now for Apple, truly, is the engagement of the heart. He created something from his vision and ideas and his team that captivated us, that called to us, that sang to us, literally, if you talk about iTunes, that engaged our heart, which engaged our minds, and then gives us the opportunity to engage God's omnipotence through us, through something that simple. And then, of course, there have been further revolutionary things from Apple. But Mr. Jobs isn't the only one. There are evolutionary, revolutionary things happening all the time when any of us listen to that higher voice, when we stop tuning out the other stuff, when we get the bloated nothingness and the old-fashioned idea of ego out of the way. Martha Beck, who is a writer and a coach, says, many of us have spent a lifetime trying to be what we're not, feeling lousy about ourselves when we fail, and sometimes feeling lousy even when we succeed. We hide our differences when, by accepting and celebrating them, we could collaborate to make every effort more exciting, productive, enjoyable, and powerful. Wow, yes. Live out of your imagination, not your history, says Stephen Covey. Live out of your imagination. Think of some of the many people who have influenced your life. Maybe it was Mr. Covey, maybe it was Walt Disney, maybe it was Steve Jobs. I don't know. We all have our, little icons and heroes who lived out of their imagination, their vision, their faith, their trust, their art, their understanding of who they are, even in a world where sometimes it was misunderstood or not heard or ignored altogether. And they kept going. There was perseverance, there was faith, there was trust. If this time-space reality has within it the ability to inspire a desire within you, it is absolute that this time-space reality has the ability to yield to you a full and satisfying manifestation of that same desire. It is the law. Now, that sounded like Ernest Holmes, but it was actually Abraham Hicks. Which is, I love that, when you get someone who is outside the teaching, so to speak, that echoes exactly what we teach and preach as religious scientists, what our philosophy is about. Being able to listen and hear, to integrate our ideas, our feelings, our visions, and find a way to bring it into the world and find harmony. Otherwise, I think we could all just be monks on a mountaintop. Do you realize how much easier sometimes that would be? You know, we don't have to deal with other people who have different ideas than we do or who don't understand us when we have a challenge. So if we're up on the mountaintop and we're eating, you know, natural foods and we're all by ourselves there and we're just meditating for days and days, it sounds kind of simple. Bless you. And there are days when that seems really desirable, to get away from it all, to shut it all out, go there, be quiet, be still, and connect with Spirit and know God. And yet, the real work is when we can bring who we are from the mountaintop consciousness of God, from the mountaintop consciousness that Dr. Martin Luther King talked about 50 years ago next week. If we can bring that mountaintop consciousness down into our everyday path, where there are streets and intersections and stop signs and green lights and red lights, where we are working with each one of our own egos. And if we can begin, as religious scientists, to evolve and develop the ability to not have such judgment and separation on ego, and that we run into someone and something flares, that we can go, oh, the ego's out. Let me examine which one it is. Sounds like edging God out. Feels like that. Okay, where am I? Oh, wait, I'm edging God out too. Start over. Where's my bracelet? You know, and you swap it again. And that's why I say it's an awareness thing. So I no longer, by the way, am calling this a complaint bracelet. First of all, I did get rid of it. I don't like to even focus on that word, complaint. I don't even want to put power on that. So what this has been for me has been just a shift in mindfulness. Isn't it wonderful that we've got Steve Flowers coming now on Monday nights so that we have an additional active practice of being mindful to who we are and what we do in the world. There is a quote, which I don't remember the source and I didn't have the time to look it up, but I quoted it this week in talking with someone, that we're all on this path and all of us have wounds and battles that we've been dealing with or have dealt with. And then we come together and sometimes we're seeing each other as the spiritual warriors. And if we can have that open, compassionate heart of, you too have been wounded, I can see through that and open our hearts to that, then we're not ego bashing. Because we're all doing the best that we can do. And I really had to think about that. I really asked myself that question. Are we really doing the best that we know how to do? And I think that we are. Even on those days where we're reacting out of old operating systems of our default mechanism of being a wounded child, and we come back out and it's flailing, sometimes that's the best that we can do, is to flail. And what I was reminded, and what I'm reminding myself today, is that that's one of the values and the merits and the beauties of this kind of center. We get to have this safe environment in these walls, because I believe that God is beyond the walls, of course, that we can have our days where all we are is like a temper tantrum. Then there are days when we are in such pain and fear and darkness that we can be that way here as well. And above, below, and around, it is always this space and place here where we can come and sing and dance and play and laugh and live in joy. That's the environment here. That is literally written on the walls under the beautiful paint. So that is what contains you. The safety, the space, and the freedom by which you can dance with the ego wherever and whatever level that ego is. And so that when you hear the word ego, you don't immediately get into that defensive mode about your ego. You get to change the bracelet perhaps and say, wait a minute, am I edging God out? Or am I just trying to engage God's omnipotence, omnipresence through me? So we have the skills and the tools, whether it's a little bracelet or whether it's, spiritual mind treatment, using our 1-minute miracles, your own dedicated spiritual practice of meditation, and the technology of things like Deepak Chopra right there in the palm of your hand, guiding you through delicious meditations every day. With Oprah this time. How many of you are doing that 21-day? Just a few. Ooh. I'm sure they'll offer more. It's a wonderful opportunity on the internet, and it's free. It was a 21-day practice. I thought it was kind of interesting that it kind of butted up against the other 21-day practice of meditation, of a thought for the day, and then a 15-minute guided meditation with his mellifluous voice, and then a chime, and then, oh, it's just so sweet. My cat Beauregard and I love doing that together. He sits on my lap while I'm holding Deepak. Cats are so good. Cats really engage God's omnipotence. They know how to do that. And I have also seen them edge God out. Because you know what? I love cats. And they do not like change. That's the one place where I think they're not as religious science inclined as we are. They're like, change? Excuse me, who rules this house? No, thank you. So we get this opportunity to walk this path, whether we're walking it some days as the spiritual guide and counselor and support, whether we're walking it some days as the spiritual warrior cutting away the bramble and the briar to get through to the path to the light once again when we're emerging from the dark night of the soul. That we do not have to edge God out. That sometimes when we're trying to do that wonderful thing, the vision, the call, or even just the mundane task. And we go, no, I'll handle it. I'll take care of it. It's something that a lot of people in metaphysics call the Lone Ranger syndrome. Oh, no, I can do it. Would you like some help with that? No, I've got it. How about if no, thank you. And now part of that comes from the inability to receive, that we're not taught. We're not flexible in that. The other part is that edging God out, going, no, I'm in control, and probably you wouldn't know how I wanted it done in the first place, so no. So we get to be the Lone Ranger. Can I help you lift that? No. Have you seen that? I mean, it's simple. I'm not talking about, humongous things all the time. I'm talking about you're out there. I've done it. I do it not all the time anymore. I do it a lot. I'm walking in the parking lot, and I'm carrying, bags and things like that, and someone says, can I help you? Oh, no, I'm fine. I can do it. And then you're kicking the door open this way. You don't even have a hand to open the door. And the other kind soul is standing there helpless going, I could get that for you. And you, or me in this case, we're going, no, I'm fine, I'm in control, I'm strong, I'm independent, I can do all of this because I am woman, whatever that is. I can do that. Not realizing that in edging God out there, in that example, I'm edging God out because here's a person lovingly opening their heart and soul saying, how may I serve you today? How may I love you today? And I'm going, no thanks. That's edging God out. That's where we get so, into our stuff that we're not even seeing that by saying no, because we're thinking, oh, no, I don't want to trouble you. I don't want to put you out. I'll handle it. I can do it. That we have just said no, that we have just put a wedge between the delicious law of circulation of giving and receiving, and that we're here to help and serve one another. So it can be as simple and mundane as that. Or something, big creative project, and you go, no, I'll do it. And then sometimes when we're doing that, and it's not even about the other people who are saying, I want to help. Sometimes it's about the fact that we think God doesn't know, or God doesn't listen, or spirit, because I'm not talking about God, anthropomorphizing a person in the sky. I'm talking about spirit, the higher order, the higher power, the one mind, and we still think, oh, no, you don't really understand what I want, God, because you would have fixed this, you would have done that, and that would have happened before, so how am I supposed to trust you with this project? I don't know about you, but I've done that. And that's me edging God out, thinking God doesn't hear, or won't, or can't, or something's missing here, so I just better control it and hold on to it. And the more that I do that, the more separation is taking place. Separate from the one mind, the one life, the one source. I have edged God out, closed and bolted the door, and said, no problem, I got this. That to me is ego. when we do edge God out. God showing up as someone who's willing to carry your groceries or open the door, or God showing up as this creative idea that's trying to move through you, and you just keep saying, no, I don't think so, or no, I've got it covered, or no, I don't have the time, and you go and you do something else. And yet there's that part of you. And I believe that's why and how sometimes our egos, edging God out, engaging God's omnipotence, butts head, bumper cars within ourselves, which we know and we teach, if that's happening within ourselves, it's going to outpicture out here. And then we're going to create opportunities, relationships, whether it's with someone you absolutely adore and love in your family, or it's someone at the grocery store. And you have a because your ego stuff is swirling around you, and their ego stuff is swirling around them, and then you get boom, and you fall into it. And you get going, and that's when you have a bracelet switch and you go, okay, let me pause here. Let me freeze frame the world. Let me check in. What's going on? Where is the ego flaring here? Yours, mine, ours? Where has there been the separation and the duality that I am separate from God? And if I'm separate from God, that makes me separate from each of us. See, we forget about that sometimes. That when God is standing at the front door ready to open the door for me and carry in one of my bags, and I'm edging that out. Or when I'm in meditation and I get very still and I have a vision, an idea, an inspiration, and I go, no, I'm too old. Somebody's already done it. I don't think so. And they're not going to like it. And I've edged God out again, differently. And I have separated myself from that divine flow of who I am innately and naturally. So this week, I'd like to ask that you consider the word and the phrase and the feeling nature of ego differently. And start to pay attention to where the ego shows up in you or in another around you. And begin to be kind of a sleuth about it and go, ooh, is that edging God out of control and fear? Is that edging God out because the omnipotence, the idea, the creation is trying to move its way through, and it's like a birthing process, and sometimes that's unpleasant and difficult? You get to find out. And either way, whatever you discern, whatever ego is in front of you, yours or another's, that you get to go, oh, you are the beloved in whom God is well pleased. And sometimes you have to go there first because part of you is like, I'm not going to go there, that person. At least you can go to, I behold the God within you. When people say namaste, it's I see the Christ consciousness within you. The higher self can do that, even while your little lower self that's stumbling and grumbling kind of gets its way back up to full height, to your full spiritual stature, standing on holy ground, remembering that you are one with the one, and that we are all interconnected and one with this life of God. William Durant says, forget past mistakes, forget failures, forget everything except what you're going to do now, and then do it. So it doesn't matter if someone said something negative and nasty or wrong, whether as a child and your vision and your passion were squelched, or someone in an interaction at the grocery store, butts in line and does something, and you're like, hey, forget it. Get present. Michael Singer in The Untethered Soul talks about when that stuff happens, instead of leaning into it and fighting and getting the egos out to play rock'em sock'em, whatever that name of that toy is, you need to step back. Watch it. Let him be there. Let it happen. Become witness to it, which is very Buddhist. Have that mindful practice. And then decide, what's going on here? Where's my part in it? What do I need to do? And you move through it. And perhaps you move through by putting your arm around that other person. Perhaps you move through it by calling a practitioner and saying, would you give me a spiritual mind treatment? Because I am all over the map. Or you get to be clear and strong, and you have the time and the space and the cat on your lap to go, okay, Spirit, show me. Show me what I need to know. I need to understand from this. And then to have the courage to engage God's omnipotence and to follow it. That's our new definition of ego, my new definition of ego, which I give to you if you so desire. And what I'd like us to do now is to close our eyes and do a little bit of a process before we pray out. The eternal laws of the universe steadily hold the promise of expansion and joy. Understanding those laws will reawaken within you the knowledge of your purpose and your own personal power as you remember how to access the power of the universe that creates worlds. So take a breath in. And see if you can identify one place in your life where you edged God out of a response of control or fear. And as that idea comes forward to you, if you begin to feel emotions and feelings about it, remember that you're just stepping back and witnessing it. You don't have to relive it. I'd like you to be in the crow's nest observing it. And then take that as a snapshot and freeze frame and kind of put it over to the other side of your mind and see if you can ask your higher self to bring forth for you a time when you edged God out because the omnipotence, the inspiration, the power, and the majesty of Spirit was trying to move through you and you couldn't quite engage with it. Or you felt reticent or afraid. And because this process is kind of brief, I'm not expecting you to be able to immediately identify how the two are related, but your higher self will know that that's something it can work on and reveal itself through to you. And now think of something right now in your life today, either an opportunity of friction and ego from the old idea, or an opportunity of dancing with God's omnipotence. And just be with it for a moment, the possibility and the potential of that. Maybe you're standing on the precipice of a new life, a new location, a new opportunity. Notice where the small E.G.O is telling you something other than what the capital E.G.O might be calling to you. And if something doesn't come to you right away this morning, that's okay. We've opened the door. We've begun to shine some light into that, so that if something needs to be looked at, understood, or prayed about, it will be there for you, and we're here to support. And so for now, just take that breath in and take all of that, what you've just brought forth in your own mind, what I may have stirred up with today's lesson, and breathe and exhale and release it all. Just release it all. Yes, yes, yes. Because you know what? That part doesn't exist right now. And you know what else? What you're going to do about it or with it doesn't exist yet either. And what is right here, right now, the full activity of God. Plunge into that with me. Feel yourself immersed in that experience of God, knowing it and hearing it mentally, beginning to feel it within your physical body, and then opening up your arms of your soul to say yes. I want to engage God's omnipotence, omnipresence. I want to understand the small ego that has been within me and not disown it, not judge it, not do anything other than perhaps embrace it as part of who I am in the totality of God as me. And now that we have done that, it is from that place I speak in first person. our spiritual mind treatment. A 5-step affirmative process that begins with the recognition that there is only the one life, and that life is God, spirit, intelligence, love. And the second step is unification. That is where I say, I am one with that. I unify with all of life, all of God, all of nature, all that I see that is beautiful, bright, and glorious, all that I see that sometimes isn't as shiny. I unify with that, for it is the one life of God, and there's no separation or duality. And then in the third step, it's where I realize, it's where I affirm, it's where I craft and envision those things and places and people and projects that I want to outpicture and make manifest. Knowing health and vitality for the physical body temple. Knowing creativity and expression and unlimited energy and focus and time to do that which is calling itself forth to be done through me. It matters not my age, or whether I'm retired, or if I'm still a student, or I'm just beginning a new opportunity. I realize my highest good. And if I'm in doubt about what that might be, I affirm and know that being one with God, that my highest good continues to unfold right before me. And then I move to that state, the fourth step, thanksgiving. This is the gratitude, the appreciation by which we sit in that joyful expectancy and enthusiasm of, yes, all this and more is mine, that divine order, my dreams and visions and goals. Outpicturing, serving, and expressing. And then we come to the end. Receiving it, releasing it, affirming it, knowing it to be true and whole, knowing that thy will is my will, and that there is no separation for the higher will of God through me, right here, right now, body, mind, and soul. And so I am grateful for that. Take a breath and just rest in that, in the silence for a moment. Knowing, as we spoke in some of the quotes today, that there is a universal law at work here, vibrating to that which you put into it with the intellectual ideas and words, and then added with the spice of the feelings and the emotions and the desire, stirred up, moving from that infinite mind into creative law and out picturing into form and manifestation. That is the process of this teaching. And so I give it forth with such gratitude, gratitude, and glee, and I affirm and know that this is so. And so all I need to do is ask that you join me together as we say, and so it is, and so I am, and so we are. Amen.